Woody Wommack joined by National Recruiting Director Mike Farrell and National Recruiting Analyst Adam Gorney to talk rankings. Guys, we had to do a rankings update. We've been putting it off. We were hoping things would come back. They don't. So, Mike, give us some insight into what went into the decision-making here and how we had to do the rankings update based on only seeing guys for a few months.
Yeah, this was a weird situation, obviously, and everybody's dealing with it differently. And this is very minor compared to what's going on in the world. But in our little world of rankings, there were really two choices. March 16th, I believe it was, everything sort of shut down and no travel was allowed and camps were canceled or postponed, canceled, whatever. We could have waited till August, but we felt there was no point in doing that. And we had fresh evaluations in our minds from the camps that did occur. So we did get to LA and we got to 2 spots in Florida and we got to Louisiana and Houston and obviously a bunch of 7-on-7s before the shutdown. So we decided to do a rankings release now, but it's limited. I mean, we're definitely not going to push anybody up that we didn't get a true evaluation on. And it's just not the same. This reminds me of the late 90s, 100 years ago when there were no camps and, we were just going based on VHS film. There's a lot of unknowns out there. So you're going to see a lot of 2-star kids that are undervalued or 3-star kids that are undervalued or even 5- and 4-star kids that are overvalued that we'll have to recalculate and recalibrate in the fall.
So just to kind of back up what you said, I mean, we did do a ton of traveling. Do we have 6 camps or we have 5? We had 6. 5?
Did we have 6?
I can't. Yeah, we were about to have 6 right before we got shut down a few days before.
Shut down right before Dallas.
But so we had six camp events from our series. Then, of course, 7-on-7 season's been in full swing. I mean, I went and looked at my travel, and I had done over 20,000 miles just from that short period of time. So we did see a good number of guys, but just not as many as we want. And Adam, we didn't really, like Mike said, we didn't move guys that we didn't see. So that's how the top 10 ended up staying the same. What did you think about that, especially the way we had to do things?
Yeah, I think the challenge was for us who saw guys out on the circuit through the spring, not to overvalue or undervalue what we saw. It's difficult to compare guys across the country anyway, but when you don't see, 70, 80% of them, but you do see 20%, not to really overvalue their ranking. So it was difficult because we had to judge how talented were these guys over the spring against guys that we hadn't seen for at least a few months. So that was sort of the difficult part moving forward here.
All right, so let's start with the new 5-stars. We'll start with Sam Huard. This is a guy, really controversial, I would say. Basically, the people who have seen him in person love him. That would be me, you, Gorney, and Rob Cassidy. So Gorney, tell us first why you made the push for Sam and what he brings to the table.
Yeah, honestly, we probably should have done this before. Conservative with 5-star rankings for quarterbacks. I think as we go through this cycle, he's going to be in the conversation for the number 1 overall quarterback in the class. As everyone sees him, it's impossible not to really like him. He's incredibly accurate, incredibly smart. And every time I've seen him on the circuit over the last few years and on film, he puts the ball right where it needs to be almost every single time. So there are some things I'm sure Mike is going to address that he doesn't like about him. But I think as he gets to see him more and more, I think one of the things that kind of we hesitated on was his size, but now he's much taller and filling out. And he's continued to be just the most accurate quarterback in this class. I think we probably should have made him a 5 again. He was great at the Las Vegas Pylon, one of the only events he did this offseason. And finally, we've pushed him to the 5-star status where he probably should have been.
Yeah, Mike, so you've been a Huard detractor. So tell us why you hesitated. We went to a vote. I mean, it might have even been a split decision there we had to come down to.
Well, if it was a split decision, then he wouldn't have been a 5-star. I don't dislike him. I have 2 concerns. The 2 overreaction, and that's the smooth lefty who's accurate. I mean, we got to remember that left-handed quarterbacks don't have much success. Maybe at the college level, not at the pro level, and beyond. And it's different reasons for that. You know, not only do you have to shift your offensive line a bit, but the spin is different. You know, receivers don't like catching the ball from left-handers. They're not used to it. There's so few left-handed success stories out there that just gives me pause. And then the last couple guys we've had that played the competition level like that in the state of Washington, Max Brown and Jacob Eason, didn't exactly light up the world. And I'm not holding that against Sam at all, because you can't. But level of competition is a concern of mine, and the lefty factor there. I think he has a good arm, not a great arm. I think he has good touch, and this is all film evaluation, and a good pocket presence. But he doesn't jump off the page to me as a 5-star.
Well, you know, I mentioned I saw him in person last year, and I was really impressed. My actually only reservation was perhaps the size issue, which we've de-emphasized. And then when you look at his dad and his uncle, of course, who both played there at Washington, they're much bigger than him. And like Gorney said, he seems to be kind of growing into that frame. And I hopefully we get to see him play in the fall. And hopefully we get to see him in an all-star setting. But I have a feeling we're going to be debating him going forward. The next guy that we moved up, Tunmise Adeleye, I'm sure I butchered his name because Sam pronounced
Adeleye.
Sam put.
I'm making that up. I don't know.
Okay.
Did that help, Woody?
Yeah, that helped. Anyway, he moves up 29 spots to number 15 overall. And this was a guy I pushed for personally. He won the MVP at our Rivals camp in Houston last year in 2019 as an underclassman. Then he comes to the camp in Orlando this year because he transferred to IMG and dominates there. I saw him. I love the kid. I think personally, it's hard to go wrong with a defensive end, a guy who's going to get after the passer, and especially with the way Ohio State's been producing defensive linemen, you know, over the last few years. He seems like an ideal fit there. Mike, you've only seen him really on tape and seen the camp footage. What do you like about him?
You know, big, freaky, athletic defensive ends, you really can't go wrong with unless they get injured. So I was definitely on board with this one. It doesn't matter to me where he's going or you know, if he ends up, you know, at Ohio State or decides to go someplace else. I just think that these kids that are in the 6'4", 6'5" range, 250 plus pounds, that are light on their feet, quick off the snap, and very agile and have tremendous balance and the ability to work off of contact are all the rage now. And, you know, we've had them in recent years. You know, Jordan Birch last year is a good example. And, you know, they could grow into defensive tackles down the line. And that's even better, you know, because the pass rushing defensive tackles are very, very rare. So I think he's going to stay as an end. He's certainly not Chase Young, not comparing him to Chase Young, but I could see that type of development down the line. You know, he's a little bit more raw than Young was out of high school, but big, athletic, can move. You just can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, you know, he was really dominant at the camp. What I like about him is, you know, that he seems to have that extra gear. I mean, he's got a great motor, and then we see the competition level. I mean, he wants to compete. He left his high school to go to IMG to play better competition, and he in the camp setting, he really went after the reps. All right, next guy I want to talk about, Donovan Jackson. This is a guy that's been on the radar. I first saw him personally when he was in the 8th grade at LSU's camp, and he was holding his own at that time against, you know, guys 3-4 years older than him. He came to our camp this year in Houston, did well. He was a 5-star challenge guy before. Now, he had been basically a tackle his whole life. Now he's transitioned to guard. Gorney, you could talk a little bit about him, I guess. I personally think at guard, he almost has a higher ceiling just because of his size. So what do you think about him?
Yeah, absolutely. He's probably not a 5-star tackle, but move him inside and he's a freakishly athletic guard. It's kind of like guys who aren't 5-star tight ends, but they move to offensive tackle later in their careers, and they're one of the most athletic people at that position. So I've liked him before when I've seen him on film. I saw him at the Combine in San Antonio, even though he didn't compete. I would say long-term he is a guard. I think that's an absolutely great position for him. it doesn't devalue his ranking at all. That actually makes it better and bolsters it. So he's a guy who's physical but also athletic. As a tackle, I'm not sold on him as a 5-star, but move him inside, make him one of the most athletic guards in the country, and I like him a lot there.
Yeah, the two guys that he kind of reminds me of, these are both big comparisons. Isaiah Wynn, who went to Georgia and stayed at tackle, and then Chuma Edoga, who was a fringe 5-star who went out to USC. Both of those guys were relatively high draft picks. Wynn was a first rounder. Edoga had a great rookie season for the Jets. So we've seen the 6'2". I mean, we've seen the 6'2", 6'3" guys play guard and tackle and have success now in college and beyond, right, Mike?
Yeah, I think it was a surprise to a lot of people that the Patriots took Wynn in the first round, but they obviously know what they're talking about. And, everybody said he can't be a tackle because he was 6'2". Donovan Jackson's listed 6'4". He's probably closer to 6'3", 6'3.5". Guard build, but not that wide body guard build. He's an athletic guard build, which means you can put him in certain situations where you can get out in space. He can hit moving targets. You can pull him. And you could also play tackle. I do believe you can play tackle at the college level as well, and still play like a 5-star. He's improved quite a bit since we saw him. Obviously we saw him last year at the 5-star challenge, and we liked him a lot. But he's really taken the next step in his development.
All right, next guy, another new 5-star. This one from the state of Florida, Mario Williams, a receiver. Guy who really impressed us at the camp. We almost made him a 5-star in the last rankings update when you saw him at Future 50, Mike. Just a super talented kid. Draw some comparisons to Christian Kirk and some other people. So why did we make the move on Mario?
He's not as thick as Christian Kirk, not as blocky, but he's a little bit more sudden. And this is a kid that's going to be a slot receiver and a matchup nightmare at the next level. Wherever he ends up going, you're going to have to put either a nickel on him or a safety on him, or if you do try to line up one of your best corners, they're going to have trouble, getting him from getting a clean release off the line of scrimmage. He's just very good at getting off the line. He's extremely good at route running. He's very sudden. He gets separation. Good hands and all that stuff. The only question is the size. And again, I think with every position, we just talked about Isaiah Wynn at offensive guard. We've talked about smaller linebackers, shorter guys now, shorter quarterbacks. I think size is really not that much of an issue anymore, when it comes to the wide receiver position as well. The days of Megatron and all those guys, going first round, and obviously everybody wanted a 6'5" wide receiver. They still want them, but this is the type of kid that can really kill you in the right offense, and I think he's going to be a star in college.
Yeah, and some of those other guys, the hold up on him might be if we look at guys who are his size who've been successful. You mentioned Christian Kirk, even Rondale Moore. Kind of have more of a, almost like a running back type body. He's a little thinner than that, but I mean, we've seen, even if you look at like Amari Rodgers at Clemson, a guy who bulked up more even after he got to college. So I think we could see that there. All right, let's move on to one of the guys we dropped, Mike. This is a tough one. This was one of the guys you moved up last time, Tyreak Sapp. We moved him up to 5-star after Future 50. A few more guys, including myself, saw him in Orlando. Now we moved him off 5-star. The Florida fans are going to be mad at you. So let's talk about it a little bit.
They don't have to be mad at me. I mean, this was a one-man, band for Tyreak Sapp. I was the only one who really liked him as a 5-star. He's a little bit sawed off as a defensive end. He's not long, but he's very, very powerful. Remind me of Carl Lawson from 100 years ago. Now, looking at it, Carl Lawson had a solid career at Auburn, and I think he was a 4th-round pick, and he's still in the NFL now. But certainly not a All-American first-rounder, freak of nature. The thing about Sapp is that he's still so raw. I mean, he missed part of his junior season. He doesn't have a lot of technique. He's got motor, energy, power, but he doesn't have technique yet. But I still think that he's going to be a special one down the road. But other eyeballs were on him. He didn't look that great at our camp. I mean, I watched the film of it, and it goes back to that rawness where he just sometimes if you stone him, he doesn't know what to do, and he'll learn that. But right now, he's got to improve his pass rushing moves and technique.
Yeah, I mean, I see why you liked him, but I just didn't see personally a 5-star when I watched him. I think the other guys that were there agreed. Lawson, one of the things that set him apart was just how fast he was getting off the ball, and I don't think Sapp necessarily is quite the athlete of Lawson. So that's why we made the move there. Another guy who made a big move up, Micah Morris, he committed to Georgia. This is a guy who's kind of been up and down. He started off pretty high. We slipped him down a little bit. He showed up in Orlando and looked great. Adam Gorney, I know you watched the video. You weren't there. But big guy who can really move. Some people think he might be a guard or a right tackle. But what did you think of watching the tape on him?
Yeah, and he's a kid that has that position versatility, and some people think that might be a negative, but I actually think it's a positive. Get him in the system, see where he fits. He could play tackle. He could play guard. He's a powerful kid. Georgia knows, obviously, how to develop offensive linemen. Isaiah Wilson was a first-round draft pick, a 5-star, but still went to Georgia with some questions about his ability and technique. We kind of ranked him as a 5-star just because he was so massive and so dominant in New York high school football. But I think Micah Morris is a kid who might go up and down in the rankings as we see him. Could have a good day, could have a bad day, but that position versatility I love. And he's a powerful kid that's going to be playing at a school that knows how to develop players along the offensive line.
One of the things that jumped out about me, we measure wingspan at the camp, 81-inch wingspan on this kid. So you're talking like NBA power forward wingspan on a guy who's like 6'4", 6'5". So I think the people saying he's a guard, I think they're underestimating a little bit. Mike, what do you think?
No, he's a tackle, and this is a little bit of this is fat guy discrimination. Like
yes, finally.
Which I hate. I mean, as a fat man myself, I don't mind a kid who needs to reshape his body a little bit, going to the next level, as long as he's got, as you mentioned, the reach, the punch, the power. I mean, this kid's very, very powerful. And the feet, he's got good feet. Isaiah Wilson was a ceiling guy, 360 pounds, very little bad weight. This kid's 345, 350, might have to drop maybe 20 pounds or so. But I think he'll do that. He's got a good work ethic. And, I just think there's this feeling that we're looking for the next 275-pound 5-star first rounder. But sometimes they look like Jedrick Wills, and they just kick your butt from the moment you see them in high school to the moment they get to college and get on to the NFL. And, I'm not saying he's a bad-looking kid, but this is fat guy discrimination.
Yeah, and after last year's draft, there were no 300-pounders drafted. We need to change the way we evaluate. Well, then this year, you mentioned Jedrick Wills, 300-plus, Isaiah Wilson, Mekhi Becton, all those guys. I mean, we're talking 350-plus on those guys. So, I think that can be overblown. And you and I both know that a lot of coaches, especially offensive line coaches, like the challenge of having some guys lose weight. So, speaking of one of those more athletic offensive linemen, Adam Gorney, a guy who we moved up big from Utah, Kingsley, Suamataia. I'm part Polynesian now. He made a big move for us. Very athletic in the old Panay Sewell ether out there with the guys in Utah who have really been developing talented offensive and defensive linemen.
You go to Hawaii for the Polynesian Bowl once a year, and you think now you're one of the Polys. So, yeah, he's a kid who did really well at the Under Armour camp in Phoenix. He works out with Panay Sewell and the Sewell family, the tribe of Division I and NFL, future NFL players. And he's just a kid who's very, very athletic and has, a physical nature to him as well. So that's a kid who has not really been on the circuit much, hasn't really done the camps as much as some other guys. But I just absolutely love him. And honestly, and I'll be completely upfront about this, he's putting out a ton of videos of workouts that he's doing during the coronavirus, and they're very, very impressive. He can jump out of a pool of water onto outside, and I don't know many offensive linemen that can do that. He looks like he's going to go to Oregon. I think he's going to be kind of the next Penei Sewell there in terms of being able to get onto the field early. He has a great body, long arms, not hardly any bad weight at all, and he's a very athletic kid who can be physical. So I think he deserved the bump up, and we'll be in the discussion for kind of a top 10 offensive tackle in this class.
Yeah, and he was at the Under Armour camp where we got to see a lot of video of him dominating. Mike, what's your take on him? I mean, he can jump out of a pool. So
well, now I'm going to get 80,000 kids jumping out of pools in my DMs. So thanks, Gorney. I appreciate that. None of these off-season workouts mean a thing to me. When you're talking about social distancing and isolation and all that stuff, it's on-field performance. You watch him; he's got the motor, he's got the hustle, he's physical, he's agile. Gorney got to see him not jump out of a pool, but actually, in a camp setting, and he's one of those kids that doesn't get recruited as heavily because he is from Utah, but there's little doubt he's going to pan out and be a terrific football player.
How long is we've seen LSU and Alabama push into Utah a little bit. I mean, how long does the secret stay there? I mean, is it just because it's hard to crack, the BYU, Utah, and now maybe Oregon hold on the area, Gorney? I mean, it seems like now when you look at big time linemen on the West Coast, that should be the first place you start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think SEC schools have seen that. I think that's an important thing. I actually think Tua's success at Alabama has helped them recruit Polynesian players from Utah. But I also think that there are just societal things that are going on that either keep them home religiously or to keep them home close to family at Utah. I mean, we've seen guys, Leki Fotu, who was not recruited at all, star there, Bradley and I, another guy who was lightly recruited, star there. And then guys going to Oregon because of Joe Salovey and other coaches on that staff. So I think a lot of things are playing factors there. But I definitely think having a Polynesian coach on your staff, you see it with Sean Nua at Michigan. A lot of kids in California are looking at Michigan now because of the relationships they've built. There's a comfort level there. That's why Utah and BYU have done so well. But also Oregon, Michigan, I think, is trying to get involved. And then there's obviously a draw to going to Alabama and LSU, so they're going to go in there, dip in, and get some guys too.
All right, a quarterback who made a big jump up, Ty Thompson from Arizona. We had a chance to see him in LA, Gorney, and really impressed. A really smooth guy and a guy that a lot of schools, I think, having more time to review film came and really came calling for him.
Yeah, I'd seen him in 7-on-7 last spring, and I liked him. I thought he was a 4-star kid, but probably a fringe 250 kid. He showed up at LA. He was much more bulked up, physically looked much better. And then he was going up against Jake Garcia and Miller Moss in that camp and holding his own or looking better. So this is a kid who I really wanted to shoot up the rankings pretty high, committed to Oregon, definitely an offense that fits him. And as he was going through the process, he just kept talking about how he wants an offense that's designed to get him to the NFL, pro style, stuff like that. And that's what Oregon now runs. So I think he was smart about where he wanted to go. He's a smart kid, and he has all the physical tools to be really special. So I think this is a kid who actually has a chance to even move higher if we ever see a football field again.
Hey, it's Arizona. Everyone's doing great. Another guy who moved up 62 spots, Kyron Ware-Hudson, going to Oregon as well. Talented wide receiver, had a great showing at the Pylon in Las Vegas. Then came to our camp in LA and dominated as well.
Yeah, he's another kid who is physically looks great. One of the best looking wide receivers, in that top level. He's a kid who had a great junior season at Mater Dei, playing a national schedule. Bryce Young was basically Bryce Young's second favorite target on that team. He put up big numbers, and then has had a strong early spring. before everything got shut down, was great in pylon, was great at other 7-on-7s, and then was very good at our camp. For a kid who's so muscular and bulked up, he can separate, he can jump over people and catch passes. So definitely a big pickup for Oregon in Ware Hudson.
Well, the thing I like about him too is that, he's versatile. If he doesn't work out on offense, he's a big physical kid who doesn't mind hitting you on defense too. So, Oregon likes those kids, multifaceted football players. He's certainly one of them. And back to Thompson, it's hard to find 6'4", 210-pound kids who can run like he does. When you watch him on film, he gives defenses fits because, his arm strength is okay. His accuracy is solid, but it's those feet that really worry a lot of teams, I think.
All right, moving on. Next guy, another California-based player who made a big move. Calen, Bullock, committed to USC, and big-time safety, Gorney, that you really like.
Yeah, I loved him. I saw him at 2 camps. Didn't play a lot of 7-on-7, but I saw him at 2 camps over the spring, and he reminds me exactly of Marvell Tell. So he's a long, rangy, athletic safety who actually flipped over to wide receiver and played some wide receiver at our camp and looked very good there too, just because he was more athletic than everyone else. He's going to have to gain a significant amount of weight, but he's long and wiry and super bouncy and athletic. So I think at safety at SC, he's going to be able to cover a lot of ground. He's going to be able to cover receivers and then get to the deep pass and make plays that way. I don't think he's a guy that comes into the box and makes anybody scared, especially if he doesn't gain that weight. But as a guy that can cover a lot of ground and make plays on the ball, I think he's one of the better safeties in this class.
And Mike, those ball skills, we've seen them translate really well. Guys who can play both ways and can show an ability to catch the ball have had a lot of success on defense.
Yeah, or is he going to be another Marquise Lee or who am I missing, Gorney? Who am I missing? Juju Smith. These kids are very athletic. They're talented. Sometimes you just find a fit for them on the other side of the ball. And I'm not saying he's going to play offense. Obviously, they need more help on defense, and recruiting wide receivers at USC is pretty easy. But you got to like the kids that can play both ways. And there's a reputation for athletic dual side guys, I guess, not dual side, that can play both sides of the ball.
I always thought Adoree Jackson was a better receiver. I'll say this today. I understand putting your most athletic guys on defense, but man, with the ball in his hands, he was unbelievable.
I thought he was like the second best receiver on the Titans last year.
Right.
Come on, they got some good receivers on the Titans, man.
They got one. Yeah, they got one. A.J. Brown. Speaking of guys who we should have ranked higher, guys who they should have been picked higher. But let's talk receivers real quick before we wrap things up. Troy Stellato out of South Florida. Guy moved up 52 spots. Somewhat controversial, I would say. I think some people wonder if he's overrated, but I really liked him. And Mike, he put on a show at that camp. Of course, went viral with the clip where he had a DB try to hit him in the face, and he ended up on Sports Center. So, what'd you like about Troy?
With him, it's not all the typical. He's a great route runner and he sets people up well and all that other garbage. This kid can run and this kid can separate and he's physical. You can try to jam him if you want. You're not going to be able to. You can play off him and he's going to make you look stupid. So, he's really an excellent dynamic receiver and a downfield threat. And yes, he can run all the routes and he has great hands. Choosing between Ohio State and Clemson, obviously they have a pretty good success rate with wide receivers, so we'll see where he ends up going. But Stellato is one of those guys that we liked and then we loved, and we haven't done much about him since, because he's sort of delayed his decision a little bit. He's going to decide in the summer and choose between those two schools, so he hasn't played the drama card. But this is one of the most, I would say, one of the wide receivers that's a sure thing in this class that he's going to be successful barring injury.
Yeah, and I think you look at his stats from high school. I mean, you're talking about a guy who averages 17, 18 yards a catch. So you mentioned the speed factor. I think that's one thing that kind of gets discounted. I also like that. I like that he doesn't get rattled. You mentioned, I mean, a lot of people tend to go at him at the camp. The guy tried to hit him in the face, and the play that took off, and they ended up nose to nose. And you just love that competitive spirit. So Troy's a guy that I think a lot of people are gonna feel foolish, especially if he ends up at one of those two places and has a good college career. Another guy that we moved up, another Florida wide receiver, Braylon Brown. This guy moved up 35 spots. He was another guy who really was on the precipice of having just a breakout spring. He commits to Ole Miss, and Mike, he also did a great job at the camp down in Miami.
Yeah, I mean he's not as sudden, but he's obviously longer. He's got a better catch radius. He's got a bigger frame. He's a tall, skinny kid, um, that makes really good plays on the football. He's going to be a quarterback's best friend at Ole Miss because if it's in the range of Brown, 50-50 balls or thrown over the wrong shoulder or whatever, he's going to make the catch because he's very good at adjusting to the football. I don't think he's going to run away from a ton of people. But that doesn't mean he's just going to be a possession receiver. He's going to be one of those downfield 50-50 guys, and he's going to win the battle more often than not. Plus, he's a physical kid. He doesn't mind blocking. So very well rounded. And this is probably the biggest pickup, obviously, for Lane Kiffin so far, because this kid was a really hot name after the early camps, and a lot of schools were charging heavy after him.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that's gonna really bulk up when he gets to college and kind of be one of those physical receivers that are tough for DBs to deal with. All right, guys. Before we wrap up, anybody else you really wanted to touch on? I know we had a bunch of other guys move, but Mike, what do you think? Anybody else on your mind?
The guard out of Miami, Lawrence Seymour, is a kid that moved up, and he's, we're talking about those undersized guys that are going to get bigger. He's like a living speed bump, like 6'2", maybe 6'1.5", but about 275. You cannot get around this kid. You just can't. And those are the type of kids, he's going to bulk up to probably 295, 300 pounds. He's going to Miami, and they really need some help on that line. And even though he's not the biggest offensive lineman in the world right now, I could see him bulking up and playing early at Miami.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of Delone Scafie, who went there and has played a lot for Miami, even though they've had offensive line issues big time. Gorney, you got anybody else you want to talk about?
I don't. I think you've done such an incredible job covering everybody that we can end this right now.
All right.
The speed bump thing, though, that was pretty good, right?
Yeah, that was.
You ever try to get around a speed bump?
Yeah, I drive right over it.
Well, okay. All right. So that analogy sucked. All right.
Yeah, they hardly slow me down, really. I mean, that's not a great analogy.
Oh, that's because you're driving a Prius or whatever West Coast people drive.
Seymour, another guy though, he's 6'1", but he's got a 6'6" wingspan. So another one of those guys with long arms that we really like.
Wingspan's a really underrated stat too. Like height, weight, great. Wingspan's really, really important when you're talking about offensive and defensive linemen.
Yeah, one of the reasons I can hold my own on the basketball court despite my speed bump type physical ability. Yeah,
it's covering the room.
Look at
that. Gorney, can you hit the edge of the screen or not?
Gorney's got those little T-Rex arms. Yeah, there you go. There you go, T-Rex.
All right, so that wraps it up for us. Be sure to stay locked into Rivals.com. All week we got rankings coverage. We got the top 100. We got the top 250. We got positions. We got state rankings. So be sure to check it all out on Rivals.com. Thanks, guys.